Okay, so we are recording, and just like last time, I will share the link as soon as it's sent to me. Usually that happens either later tonight or tomorrow morning. I'll get the link and I will post it to Blackboard. So for anybody who misses it, or if you just want to rewatch it, you're more than welcome to jump on and do that. Okay. So, yep, let's go back a little bit. So when we talk about physical development, one of those days, um, infants, of course, grow very, very fast in the first 2 years. And you know, you don't have to know, like on a test, I'm not going to say by 5 months, how much is the weight? No, you don't have to be that specific, but the weight has doubled by 5 months, by a year, tripled, and by the end of the second year, quadruples. These are kind of milestones that a pediatrician would look for to see if everything is going according to developmental plans. Now, of course, genetically, there can be some flexibility there. You may have a child who's, was a preemie. Of course, it's going to take a little longer. Birth weight's going to take longer to come up to get doubled, so more than 5 months. Length, again, by a year, about 30 inches tall. By the end of the second year, about 3 feet tall. Not everything grows the same, and that's why the image that we see on this next slide gives you a really good idea of how the body changes over the 25 years. Notice on the newborn how large the head is in proportion to the body, that elongated body, the shorter legs. But as we grow and develop, how the size of the head to the body completely changes. So this gives you an idea, like when you're doing your interviews or your observations, you may want to notice where in that development they are, especially if you're doing like a 3-year-old or a 6-year-old, how that compares. And if it's somebody that you could ask to see maybe a photograph or a picture of when they were younger, you would also be able to see this proportional growth. There are some gender and ethnic differences there's a tendency for girls to be shorter than boys. Again, genetically, not always, but that's the pattern that we see. Our Asian infants are smaller than North American Caucasian infants, and African American infants are bigger than North American Caucasian infants. When we talk about the growth principles, in particular, you want to know the first two, cephalocaudal and proximodistal. Cephalocaudal is top down, so from the head down, those muscles are going to develop first, your core, before your lower legs, your feet, etc. Proximodistal is in out. So again, core muscles and out towards your arms, hands, wrist, fingers. Okay. So these core muscles that are really going to be the structure for holding our body up are the things that develop first. It's a basic hierarchy. So we need these core muscles to hold our neck, to help with cartilage forming. We need our ability to eventually stand, even if it's just holding on to something, and then to stand on our own, and then eventually walk. But, when people say that their child is, say 2 months, oh, my child is walking. No, they're not. Don't let anyone tell you that. What they're seeing is what's called the stepping reflex. And it looks like they want to walk, but I guarantee if you put that child with their feet to the ground down they will go because they just don't have the muscle tone and the muscle control yet. Because again, it's top down. So those legs are a long way from being developed at 2 months. But they will see that movement like they're stepping. And the same thing is for the swimming reflex. They'll kick their feet and they'll move their arms in water. But again, I guarantee if you let them go, sink they will because they don't have that coordination. That would be a combination of gross and fine motor skills. And they don't have that at that young age. So as much as parents want to believe that their child is special and they're able to walk so much earlier than any other child or swim so much earlier than any other child, it's not happening. That's a developmental thing. Now, here you got to pull up some memory from your long-term memory from Intro to Psychology on the nervous system. Remember the neuron? Yeah, you know, it's the thing that helps us to communicate with all the parts of our body. So infants are born with about 100 to 200 billion neurons. That's why we can react so quickly, because there are so many neurons. Remember, there are sensory neurons, there are motor neurons, and there are interneurons. And when you have a connection of all three of those, you know, that work together, we call that a brain circuit. And it is what helps us to communicate from our different senses. Remember, our senses are visual, auditory for hearing, gustatory for taste, olfactory for smell, and tactile for touch. So our sense organs are stimulated. The neurons take that information to our brain. The brain then takes that information, processes it, and decides what it's going to do, and then uses the neurons to go back to the different parts of the body to say, hey, move your hand's in the fire, it's getting burnt. And it happens very quickly because of those billions of neurons. When you think of the structure of a neuron, and pull up the neuron picture right there, we have the dendrites. They kind of look like tree branches. That's where the impulse comes in. This middle section, that's the soma, S-O-M-A. That's the cell body. It's kind of the brains of the operation. We have the axon, which is this long, windy part of the neuron that's covered with a substance called myelin that helps the impulse to get from one end of the neuron to the other. And then when we get to the end, these are called terminal buttons. They kind of look like ET's fingers. And in the terminal buttons, there are these vesicles that hold neurotransmitters like serotonin, dopamine, acetylcholine, GABA, different endorphins, etc. And it's those chemicals, once stimulated, that are released, go into, and it would be right after this point of the terminal buttons, what's called the synapse or the synaptic gap, or sometimes it's referred to as the synaptic cleft. All a matter of semantics. It doesn't matter which one of those terms you use, you're going to be correct. So no two neurons touch. So the way they communicate is once that stimulus hits the terminal buttons, neurotransmitters are released into the synapse and they connect to the next neuron's dendrites, you know, these things up here, but on the next one. And they work kind of like a lock and key, like serotonin goes to the serotonin receptor site. Dopamine goes to the dopamine receptor site. And they fit perfectly. And it's those neurotransmitters that are going to either cause the next neuron to fire or not, or to speed it up or to slow it down. Sometimes people need additional pharmaceuticals. An example would be if you would be chemically depressed, you may need to take what's called an SSRI, selective serotonin reuptake inhibitor. And it causes the neurotransmitter serotonin to stay in the synapse longer to make the next neuron fire, because serotonin is a mood elevator and it can help lift your mood if you're depressed. Okay, that's for chemical depression. But that's a review of what you learned in intro the last time you took that course. So here is the neuronet of a baby. So we have at birth, and notice it's very sparse. And then look at the difference in 1 month, then 3 months, then 15 months, then 24 months. Over those first 2 years, a lot is happening. See, babies are born not fully developed. Your brain does not stop developing until you are 25. 25. So you have a lot of growing to do, and you need a lot of help too. That's why early stimulation of the brain is very important for babies. Extremely important to stimulate that brain. And there are many, many, many ways that you can do that. Like one of our activities for this class is to do like a toy review, where you're going to have to go online and find 10 toys and you're going to review them. You know, why are they good? Why are they bad? What does a child learn from it? Well, there are some really wonderful toys out there for brain development. So you might come across one of those. Or, you know, one of the other activities you do is make a child's game, whether it's a board game or, you know, a directional game that you would lead. We're going to share those all in class. You may want to come up with a game that stimulates the brain. So you have just to plant some seeds to start thinking about what you want to do. I suggest if you have any children in your family, children love to make games. They can actually do your assignment for you because they're pretty good at making up games, you know. So if you're stumped and you're like, oh, I don't know what to do, try asking a few kids because they have an awesome imagination. Okay. Now, if you ever heard this phrase, use it or lose it, when we talk about human development, human development, it's important that you use your brain all of your life. That's really key because we need the early stimulation. And as we're older, and we'll talk about this when we get to that part of the course, like the last 2 weeks of class, in order to keep our brain functioning at peak levels, we need to stimulate the brain, whether it's doing crossword puzzles or reading books or even playing bingo. Something to keep your brain going, because your brain will prune away things that it doesn't use. It will find the fastest way and get rid of things that it doesn't need. It just, lets them die off, just like you prune dead branches like on a rose bush. It's the same thing. If they don't use it, it's gone. Well, someday you may need those. Think if somebody had a stroke and your brain is very plastic, and it's really good at finding its way around different things. Like it can, really do remarkable things. So, you might still be able to move your arm or move your leg or talk if the brain can still figure out how to get the message to that part of the body. But if you haven't stimulated those parts of the body for a while, the brain has nowhere to go because it's already pruned off those alternatives. So early stimulation of a child is essential, and it is also when you're older. So if you have older parents, grandparents, great-grandparents, keeping them active and stimulated, and younger children. So like when you do your interview or you do your observation for this first category for your project, look to see what's being done that's stimulating that child. Are there mobiles above their crib if you're doing a baby? And are they colorful? Do they make noises? Do they have toys as they're older where they have to put, the square into the square peg or the triangle into the triangular peg, things like that, that would be stimulating the brain to help the neuron size increase. Again, the brain is going to triple in weight in the first 2 years of life and does not stop developing that frontal lobe. All the executive functioning does not stop until you're 25. So anyone in this class that's under 25, your frontal lobe is still developing. You are not done. I'm old. My brain stopped developing a long, long time ago, but yours is not. So it's still important to continue to stimulate your brain and take care of your brain. So your brain, of course, at this time is very sensitive to injury. And it's not like it isn't sensitive to injury other times. I mean, you've heard many times people getting concussions, some of them severe concussions, to the point that they can't do some activities anymore. I had a young man who was a football player at Central, probably about 15, 16 years ago, who was sled riding, not wearing a helmet, hit a patch of ice, went headfirst into a tree, major concussion, amnesia. He forgot everything that happened after 6th grade, everything. Like he didn't know who his friends were. He remembered nothing from high school or junior high. And little pieces would come back, but basically he had to relearn everything. But he was told that he could no longer play sports, and he was very active in football, and he was really upset, but they told him his injury was so severe to the brain that if he would have another, brain injury of that proportion, it could actually kill him. So that kind of settled the debate on whether he was playing sports or not for the rest of his life. So you do have to protect your brain at all time. But you would be amazed at how many young people are affected because either they accidentally were shaken or they were purposely shaken. 600 to 1,400 cases per year in the United States, shaken baby syndrome. And they can tell just by looking at a scan. This just doesn't happen. You can see it. If, a child falls, hits their head, it's going to be, just a little part of the brain. You're going to see the concussion. When you have like half the brain concussed, yeah, that's a real issue. So, of course, the younger they are, the more damage can be done. But hopefully we can teach our parents and people who work with children that this is not appropriate to shake the baby at any time. But there are different times in the development, a sensitive period where, the environment really helps with brain development, singing, talking to your baby, playing with your baby, supporting your baby. Touch is a huge, huge way to help development occur. Here's a picture of shaken baby syndrome. You can see this top part, this white part. This is all damage that has been done because of the caretaker shaking the baby. There are cycles that occur, different patterns. Of course, children are hungry at a certain time, they go to sleep at a certain time, they wake up. Some children don't want to sleep all through the night and just ask their parents, and they're very sleep deprived for the first couple weeks, maybe even months. But newborns sleep quite a bit. We're talking 16 to 17 hours, and it's very active sleep. If you remember from your intro class, REM sleep, rapid eye movement, that's when your brain is most active. It's also when you dream. And newborns are sleeping 16 to 17 hours because they don't have a lot of other activity to stimulate their brain. They're babies. What do? They lay in their crib, they get up, people walk them around a little. But, it's even important changing positions of how you carry the baby. Not only always like against your chest, turn the baby around so they get a different view of the world. You can buy those strapping scarves that they have, or you can have a baby carrier on your back so they get that point of view. So, it's good to let them see different things. But most of their brain stimulation at these early months are during sleep. So they, do need to get rest, because that's what's really activating their brain and getting that neural net moving. So as I mentioned, REM sleep, okay, dreaming. We have different brain waves as an adult than we do as an infant. Like I said, most of half of the infant's sleep is REM sleep. Whereas adults, we have, if you're getting 8 hours of sleep, you're getting about 3 full cycles of REM. If you're getting less than that, it depends on how much less than that. You might only be getting 2. And if you're getting 9 hours of sleep, you're getting about 4. It's recommended if you are 25 and under, you should be getting 9 hours of sleep. And in all the times I've been teaching psychology for the college, there aren't too many of my college students that are getting 9 hours of sleep a night. Very few. So this is where you have to kind of watch to make sure you're getting enough REM sleep so you don't go into REM rebound, which usually causes really, really bizarre dreams that you can have. But we do see that happen, but your brain is still developing, so you get those. You need that REM sleep to keep that adult development going to, again, frontal lobe is all your executive functioning, all your motor processing, all your decision making. It's the home of your personality. Really, really important. You get enough sleep. Okay. SIDS, and this is always so depressing when I talk about this. And in my human growth class at Allegheny, I actually have an individual in my class whose child died from SIDS. And it was a very emotional class this week because she shared that with the class. SIDS is sudden infant death syndrome. It's unexplained. You don't know why. Perfectly healthy baby, nothing wrong. She shared that the baby was 4.5 months, and she put the baby down, and they had a separate room for the baby. They did have, a monitor, and she just naturally got up. She had to use the restroom, and she went to check in on the baby, and the baby wasn't seemed to be moving, and she found the baby dead, and it was just so sad. Um, and there's tons of research that shows people in relationships that lose a child, many of those relationships don't survive after the loss of a child. But we're talking about 2,500 infants in the United States every year die from SIDS, and there's no known cause. There are a couple things that have helped lower that rate because we are seeing a lower rate. And that's the back to sleep movement. So instead of placing a baby on their stomach uh, to sleep, where their mouth would be close to the pillow where maybe they could suffocate, you put them on their back and you protect them so they really can't move a lot. And therefore their airways are open. So we have seen a decrease in, the last 20 some years. If you just look at the chart again, you wouldn't have to memorize the chart or anything, but you can see on the chart that it has gone down significantly. But any is too many. And since we don't really know what's causing it, we know low birth weight. Sometimes we see more kids with SIDS, and smoking in the home, like secondhand smoke, or did mom smoke during pregnancy? Also may have some effect, but there's a correlation. Remember, correlation does not imply causation. There's a correlation, a higher correlation if mom or if they're smoking in the home and the chance of SIDS. So of course they recommend you don't do that. But there are also children who have died who neither parent smoked, nobody in the home smoked, no smoking during pregnancy. It was a perfect pregnancy, perfect birth, and the child dies in the first year. So it's just a very sad situation. So like the pattern before, these are the reviews. You should know what it is. Here's some examples of questions, how I would format it on a test. Physical development, again, moving on. Basic reflexes, there's about 12 reflexes that are very common that you would be familiar with. I mentioned the swimming reflex. Again, the baby really isn't swimming. Eye blink is the natural one that stays throughout your entire life. Somebody throws something at you, you will blink. I mean, that's just how it is. You're going to blink unless you know it's coming. And then you could hold your eyes open like this and not blink. But that's a reflex that does not go away with age. There are, more reflex, turning for nursing, Babinski for your feet, your toes curl. Sometimes we see differences in different populations of culture, just the way a reflex might be displayed in, a indigenous people versus Caucasian infants. So we do see that difference. And just so here, let me close this out so you can see just some of the different reflexes. My favorite always to show, let me pull up if I can get this. Okay. Is the startle reflex. Children are actually born that they can do this startle reflex. And what it is that if the baby feels unsupported at any time, I always say, if you throw your baby up in the air, but I don't really mean throw your baby up in the air. If you just kind of bounce your baby, you'll see this reflex. The baby will spread its arms and then put its head down, move its arm in, and kind of curl almost like a ball. And that's the reflex. It just automatically happens. And that's to protect all the vital organs. So if the baby falls, it would roll instead of just falling flat and, possibly killing them. And it's interesting, if anybody has ever skydived, that's how you land. So we're born with that reflex, and then we lose that reflex. And if you ever decide to go skydiving, they actually have to teach you how to do that. But we automatically do that as a baby. It's just a reflex. We're born with that. So it's an interesting scene to talk about different types of reflexes. Gross motor skills first. Infants can move. Yes, by 6 months, they can move. And they are crawling typically between 8 and 10 months. And they are walking by supporting themselves on furniture or something. And by 1 year, most are walking on their own. So when people say you have to watch for the terrible twos, no, it's actually the terrible 1 and 1.5, because they can get around pretty quickly and they can get themselves in dangerous situations very quickly. So you have to make sure that your child-proof environment is ready for that. Watching for stairways. There was a situation at Mercy Hospital a couple weeks ago. We had a young boy who was severely burnt. He was, I think, 2. And his parents were in the living room and they were cooking something in the oven, and their child just went wandering, and it was just wandering around the house, and opened the oven door and tried to climb in. 2nd-degree burns all over their arms, just an accident. But again, they're on the move, and you have to be ready for it. They will put things in places that they shouldn't. They will consume things and put it in their mouth. You know how many people use jars for something else, and children will see it and think, oh, that's some sort of juice, and it's actually Drano. I mean, you would say, why would, but they don't know. They just saw that the container looks like something that they had before. So can't wait till 2 to protect the baby, because they're going to be moving far before that. And this little diagram kind of gives you an indication of what they can do. Again, you don't have to memorize this. This will help you, though, when we do this activity next week, so you may want to put a little star by this to come back to this. But gross motor skills, the palmar grasp, they grasp with the palm of their hands. So, you know, like grabbing at things, that's a gross motor skill. The pincher grasp develops a little later. That's their ability to pick up a smaller object. It can get very, very small. But prior to that, they're just grabbing. I always like to say if you've ever been grabbed by a baby, it feels like the Vulcan death grip because they will hold on to you and it's just like, oh my gosh, you can't believe that they're that strong. But yeah, once they attach, you know, you might have to tickle them to let them to get to let go. Then again, they might like being tickled, so they may do it a lot. So those fine motor skills, as I was talking about, you know, just the grasping objects. By the age of 2, they should be able to drink out of a cup without spilling. I wouldn't give them a glass cup yet. Plastic, paper, okay? And it doesn't have to necessarily be a sippy cup. By 2, they can drink from a regular cup. But I would still avoid glass because accidents still happen at this age. They don't think, they trip, they fall, and now you have a child that's surrounded by glass who may not have shoes on, except so stick with plastic. I would say till they're at least 3, but technically they should be able to drink out of the cup at 2. Do simple things. And again, we already mentioned about the pincher grasp, making that circle to pick up smaller objects. And again, fine motor development, you don't have to memorize this, but this little chart will help you also with the activity that we're going to do next week. When they can hold a rattle, when they can hold a crayon to color, okay? Building things, putting lines on a piece of paper and actually starting to try to write on a line. Now, it might be very large print, but they can still do that. Okay. When we talk about different norms, again, all of these are based on averages of large samplings of children. The Brazelton Neonatal Behavioral Assessment Scale. If you just say Brazelton, everyone knows what you're talking about. You don't have to remember the whole long thing. There are basically 27 categories that you look for, different aspects of behavior that can tell you if your child is developing at the right pace, at a normal pace. And your pediatrician will do that for you as you make visits. So it's not something that you as a parent would need to know, even though you could go online and type in Brazelton scale and it would give you all of them. But it's anything from how they interact with others, you know, are they outgoing or are they more shy? Motor development, what they can do, physiological control, etc. You know, how they respond to stress. So a loud noise would cause a baby stress. What's the reaction to the loud noise? Things like that. Motor development is, it really depends too on the culture or, you know, even here in the United States, the environment. I always share the story when I would take my youth group up to Brinkle's Farm. Now, these are city kids, you know, city kids, high school kids that have never worked a farm ever. And we would go up and help them pick their crop in the fall because if frost hit, they could lose half of their pumpkins, you know, and this was their livelihood. They had to survive on the things they sold in the fall to make it through the winter. So we would go up and help, and they had 8 children, and the youngest child was not quite 3. And we're in the field, and here's this little 3-year-old telling my students and me, woman with 2 master's degrees, "Oh no, you can't pick that squash. Look, see, there's a mark. A deer started to eat that. No, you can't pick that one. That still has too much yellow." Uh, an under 3-year-old knew more about farming, was more agile, knowing how to pick a crop than the rest of us. So it depends on your immediate culture too and your environment. She learned that from observation and doing with the family every day. We were there one time going, oh my gosh, we need Ben Gay, we're going to die because but it was something she did every day. And she was clearly able to explain it to us. So it was kind of cool to see a young child like that actually develop completely in that frame of reference. So, nutrition's an issue around the world. We have people here right in Pittsburgh that are food insecure. Um, we have people living on the street. We have children living on the streets and under the bridges and down by the river. You know, proper nutrition is hard sometimes. We do have things like WIC and other programs, food banks, etc. But the need is great in many cases. And a lot of times the money just isn't there. By the time you pay for a place to stay and you're paying a light bill or, a gas bill or a water bill or a storage bill, you may not have a lot left. So fruits and vegetables, if you haven't been to Shop and Save, Giant Eagle, Walmart, any of those great stores, are pretty expensive right now. And there's a lot of your nutrition. And sometimes you can't afford it. And not to put down McDonald's, because you can get nutritious food at McDonald's, and it's okay to have food that isn't nutritious every now and then. But if you can only afford food that isn't always nutritious, but it will fill your children's belly, you might do that so they're not hungry, but they're not necessarily getting the proper balance of the nutrients that they need. So then you might have to supplement it with vitamins. And in here, even parents have to watch. Now, of course, you have the Flintstone vitamins and how cute, and everyone loves that. Well, now they have, of course, gummy ones, but kids don't think of them sometimes as vitamins. They think of them as gummy candies. And there have been children that have eaten entire bottles of gummy vitamins. So you're going to be making a phone call to your pediatrician because that's going to cause a problem. If they eat 3 or 4 of them, they're, well, depending on their age, but they would be okay. But if you have a child who's eating like half a container of gummy vitamins, yeah, there's going to be some issues there. So just keep children's little hands away from things that can harm them. But malnutrition is really, really a key thing around the world, but we see it, in some cases in third world countries. Um, you can tell sometimes, around the holidays, they always show those videos of little children around the world that need our help and need fed. And you see them and they have the real big stomachs. Well, that big stomach is actually filled with water. They're starving. In those cases, mom's breast milk might actually be the most beneficial for them. Typically, here in the United States, most people are done breastfeeding around the age of 1, and starting to supplement with like cereals. Cheerios seem to be a really popular favorite. strained fruits, things like that. Sweet things, because babies like sweet instead of sour and bitter. If you need a pick-me-up someday, just a good laugh, go on YouTube and type in babies eating bitter foods, and you'll get these pictures of babies doing this. You give them a little piece of uh, like a lemon, and they'll be like, so if you just need a good laugh, been a bad day, just go to YouTube and you'll get a good laugh doing that. But babies like sweet. They like sweet a lot. Obesity is an issue. Any weight greater than 20% above the average for a height, those height and weight charts haven't changed in probably 80 years. So a good portion of the people in the United States are actually considered obese. Some are considered morbidly obese, and we even see young infants that are considered obese. I always use myself as an example. At second grade, I had to have my tonsils removed because I couldn't swallow anything. I couldn't swallow food. So I had to have my tonsils and my adenoids removed, which meant I could finally eat. And I put on weight very, very quickly because I could finally eat. And by fourth grade, my doctor had me on pretty much speed, a diet pill to try to get me to lose weight at fourth grade. At fourth grade, I didn't like the taste of those, and I didn't like what it made me feel like, so I wouldn't take it. And they would keep prescribing different types. And eventually, by the time I got to eighth grade, I just said, no, I'm not taking this. It just makes me feel weird, and it's not really working. But we do know that childhood obesity can also predispose that person to adult obesity. Okay. There are disorders that children, even if they have proper nutrition, they're not given extra sweets or candies or things like that, still may gain lots of weight. And there have been situations where Child Protective Services have been called because a child is obese, and they'll come and they'll investigate, and they'll see it's nothing that the parents are doing wrong. It's just a disorder that the child has. Children who have been breastfed have a lower risk of obesity as an adult. All the essential nutrients, immunity from childhood diseases from mom, easy to digest for most babies, not all. Convenient and inconvenient. So convenient because it's right then and there. For moms that choose to breastfeed, a couple things. One, it hurts. It does. Your nipples will hurt. Two, you need to pump if you're not feeding. So if you go back to work, you're going to need to take a pump. You're going to have to take times. Many places have lactation rooms. Here at South Campus, we have one actually on the floor that we're on. It's like 3 doors down, a lactation room. So it's a nice, quiet little place that you could pump or you could nurse. And many facilities now have these. Prior to that, or if you're in an older facility, you just kind of went into the bathroom and sat on a toilet. But the goal is to try to make it most comfortable for the mom and for the baby. If mom does go back to work, she will probably want to have pads. You can buy pads for your bra because you're going to leak. Think of how embarrassing that would be. You're up in front of a meeting and you have these 2 wet spots on the front of your breast. So typically, women who are nursing bring a shirt with them, and they tend to have pads so they don't leak through their shirt. It's much cheaper. Formula is expensive. Some people are unable to breastfeed. Some people, because they're on medication, mom has to take care of herself too. And if mom's on meds that are secreted through breast milk, mom would either have to stop those meds to breastfeed, and that may not be to mom's health. So it'd be predisposed that they would have to be bottle fed instead. Solid foods, again, between 4 to 6 months. It depends on the child. Typically, cereal. So soft things, and children love Cheerios. They love to play with children, Cheerios. Let them play with Cheerios. Let them play with their food. There's nothing wrong. They're experiencing, they're touching, they're growing, they're learning. Let them play with their food. Okay. Usually by 12 months, they say you should, uh, you know, basically be weaned from breastfeeding. Again, in countries where people may be poor and have not proper nutrition, it's not unusual that children may breastfeed until they're like 4 or 5, because that might be the best nutrition that child gets is mom's breast milk. There are indications and cases here in the United States that can raise uh, questions. An example, it's probably now, I'm guessing 12 to 15 years ago, a woman and her 8-year-old son were on the cover of, I believe it was Newsweek. She was still breastfeeding her 8-year-old son. And she said she enjoyed it and he enjoyed it, and she was going to continue to do it as long as he wanted it. Psychologically, there's a problem there. But, if you're ever bored and you want to read the story is online. There was no reason for it to happen. I mean, it's not like they were poor. It's not like they were in a third world country. They had plenty of access to food, but there are some psychological, at the age of 8, that's an issue, and it really is. And again, the review questions and question for multiple choice. And the last section here for this, the difference between sensation and perception. So let me pop back out so you can see me. So for sensation and perception, the best way to remember this from intro is to know the difference. When we talk about sensation, if you take your arm and you blow across your arm, what you just felt is sensation. You saying, I felt a warm breath, is perception. Perception is what you label or interpret of your sense that you had stimulated. So you should know the difference between sensation and perception. The worst sense for babies is visual. Babies can't see beyond 20 feet. And a baby's vision isn't adult vision like 20/20 until about 6 months. So prior to that, things are, kind of gobbled. Babies prefer complex pictures versus simpler. It's almost like a mush at the beginning, things, shapes. And so, I always tell people, if you're holding your baby, your newborn baby, and they're looking up at you and they're smiling and laughing, yeah, they really don't see your face. It's just gas. That's exactly what they don't see you. You look like one big blob to them at that point. But by the age of 6 months, they can really see you. You do have a few children that may need glasses by the age of 1.5 or 2. And there are children who, of course, are born blind. We do have children that are born deaf. There are amazing things that can be done now that couldn't be done before. Visual cliff experiment. Let me back up again. I'm sorry. The visual cliff experiment. This is how you know when your child can experience depth perception. And the setup, as you can see there, is we have a checkerboard pattern and a piece of plexiglass that has a drop floor, but the child can't fall because the plexiglass is going to hold her. And mom, dad, somebody tries to coax them to come to them, with a toy, something that they like. If they have not developed depth perception, they will crawl right across there. Once they develop that depth perception, okay, anywhere between 6 to 14 months, because it depends on the kid, they will not go beyond where that white or cream color rectangle is, because they think they can fall, because they can see down. They understand that's depth. No, it doesn't matter. You call them, you could wave their, favorite toy. They're not moving because they can see depth. They don't understand the concept of plexiglass. They think if they go beyond that point, they're going down. Okay. Again, some examples of what children prefer to see. Don't have to have those memorized, of course. Audio is sound. So hearing starts prenatally. Remember, we talked about that. Baby can hear in the womb. They don't understand words. So every child born tonight, every language is a foreign language to them. Doesn't matter what the language is, but they do hear sounds. They hear rhythms. So, one fish, two fish, red fish, blue fish, old fish, new fish, black fish, blue fish. They hear that pattern. And those musical patterns can help children settle down because they remember them. So not only do children hear in the womb, they also remember in the womb. Okay. Smell and taste, again, from the very beginning, smell and taste. Newborns can detect their nursing mom's smell. You can, the baby can smell mom's breast milk. Out of an entire room of mothers who are nursing and have breast milk, the baby can pick out their mom by sense of smell. And we talk about babies having a sweet tooth. If you can't get mom and baby to breastfeed, in other words, baby won't latch to breastfeed, typically they get some sugar water and they rub it on mom's nipple and give the baby the nipple. And typically the baby will latch because babies like sweet. So it's an easy way to get started. Pain and sensitivity, every child's different, just like every adult. But there is, a developmental thing, how children react to pain. If you ever have a chance, or if you have a child already now, or know somebody that has a young child, or if you're going to do your interview or your observation on a baby, if you go to YouTube under "What do babies cries mean?" There was a researcher in Britain who spent years analyzing the sounds and the cries of infants and then coded them. So if you would hear this sound, like, oh, or oh, certain sounds, she would tell you what they meant. Like, was it they were hungry? Were they in pain? Were they just trying to cry? Did they have gas? It was just fascinating. And again, if you're going to use a little baby, you may want to watch that to see if they cry while you're there, if you can figure out why they're crying just by the sound. And it was just really cool that somebody would sit there and listen to babies cry for, you know, literally thousands of babies cry and then code it all. So to help parents know, next parents like, why are you crying? I've fed you, I've walked you, I burped you. I don't know why you're crying. And the tonal quality was a pattern with all the babies. So it's kind of cool. So like I said, if you're gonna do a baby, you may want to watch that first. That would be interesting to put in your paper. Or if you have a baby and you've ever been like, why are you crying? It might help you understand that. And babies are very, very responsive to touch, especially newborns. You've heard of the kangaroo hold when you put skin on skin, especially for preemies. Preemies actually their stats go up, their breathing goes up, respiration, um, heart rate, if they're skin on skin. It doesn't even have to be their mom. It could be anybody, skin on skin. It can help with that development. Like I said, especially preemies. Different systems are integrated as they get older. Of course, it's not just one thing or another. We have integration of visual and auditory, or gustatory and olfactory. It's just not one separate individual thing. I mentioned before, again, carry the baby in different positions. Don't be afraid to let your baby explore their environment. Just make sure their environment is safe. So before you put your baby down on the ground, make sure outlets are covered, especially if they're on the floor. Make sure there are no wires that they can get into or exposed. Yes, babies will even put live wires into their mouth. So you need to protect them. No small things that could get stuck in their throat. Babies like to throw things in their ear. Babies like to stuff things up their nose. Babies like to swallow things like pennies, batteries. Batteries, bad, very bad. They're acid in that battery. So a little watch battery laying around, or a little AAA battery easily could be swallowed by a baby. So definitely. Rough and tumble play is okay. Again, you're not doing shaking the baby, but you can roll with the baby. That's okay. They like doing that. Uh, let them touch their food. Let them play with it. Provide toys that stimulate their senses. So, when you do the toy review in a couple weeks, think about that as you're looking at toys. What does that do for the infant? What's the best part of that toy? So again, our review, sample question, and sample short answer question that could possibly be on the test. Okay. So can we turn our cameras on for a minute? Okay. So we're going to stop there because it's 9 minutes after, and so next week we'll continue with 3-2 and try to get into 3-3. Whatever we don't finish then of 3-3, you would be responsible for. And as I said, there will be an activity that you will have to do where you're going to match whatever the child is doing to the age group that you believe it occurs. Okay, it's pretty straightforward, but I won't post that until next week because we haven't got that far yet. So we have to get through 3-2 first before you can do that activity. So we'll do that next. Again, don't get hung up on the book, like following, you want to use your PowerPoints. Use the book as your supplement to the PowerPoint. So no matter what version of the textbook you're using, go to your table of contents and look up infancy. That's the section you want to read. Okay, whether you're using the lifespan book or whether you're using the human growth book, whichever book, you just go to the table of contents. But your key material that you would be tested on is on the PowerPoint. So make sure you know the stuff's on the PowerPoint because I know everyone has that material.
Yes, I was able to print out my PowerPoint, which was good. So
Yay.
thank you.
Yay. Yeah, if
Yes.
anybody's still having any issues with emails, you know, the help desk by now should be done with the crunch of people, starting back to school. And I think they should be done with all the email mergers by now. If you're still having issues, please contact the help desk because it's 3 weeks in and you paid for this course. You deserve to have full access to this course. If you're still unable to get PowerPoints while you're waiting for the help desk to do something, just send me an email and I will attach the PowerPoint that you need to have right now, so you don't fall behind. Okay? So it's easy to print them out. 4 on a page gives you lots of space to write things. You don't have to print them out because you have access to them, but I just want you to make sure you use your PowerPoints as your study guide. So if it made it to the PowerPoint, it's possible fair game for the test. Okay? Your book is going to expand because I only have so much on there. I did give you my notes, which normally I don't put the notes on the PowerPoint, but because you're a hybrid course and I only see you for an hour and 15 minutes, I gave you my notes. But so you have more than other human growth and development classes have. You have what I normally would teach, but I gave it to you. So between the two of those, you should be fine. So I hope you have an awesome week. I will see you next week. And again, if there's anybody on here that doesn't have their actual right name on your screen now, please stay on or email me because I do have to send that 20% mark attendance by the end of the week, and that's tomorrow. So if you would please let me know so I don't mark you absent. Okay? Have a good week. Thanks. All right. Thank you. Have a good night. Take care. Hi, everyone. Sorry, I have my people in here, so can I help anybody with anything? No questions? No. Anything else you need? Do you need anything, any question you have? Got a no?